Sins of people before you even get to judgment, okay? Sins of others trail behind them. Put them in jail any longer, even though they deserve it, and you just take your chances. So, but it is getting to be like that, and inevitably they've got, like the kid that was the rapist of the high school girl. I think you all heard about the freshman high school girl that was raped in the bathroom by a guy who thought he was a girl wearing a skirt in the bathroom. And that was the second time he had done that. So, there's something really wrong at the core of how we're handling even difficult situations. But, that has to change. But otherwise, other people pay the price. When wicked people are in charge, the righteous suffer. That's all there is to it. So, any other thoughts? All right, chapter 6. All who are under the yoke of slavery. Now, notice this. We're now talking about a sensitive thing called slavery. Please don't just singularly see slavery as American form of slavery or as a black-white issue. Slavery exists all over the world yet today, and slaves are triggered by any number of things. Some owe money, like in many of these cases. Some are criminals. They frequently would take a criminal and sell him into slavery, and they would have to go and work. They'd lose 5 years of their life, but they were allowed to live. They weren't in prison, but they were the slave of somebody who was willing to take them in and keep them for a certain length of time. So slavery has a big word. We try and narrow it down, and they try and make it, all the different things that they're trying to make it today. But it's best for you to keep your mind as open as you can, understanding that some people had to sell themselves into slavery just to pay their bills. All right? It's called no government to bail you out when you go into debt. Or the guy comes and says, you're going to pay up or we'll break both legs, that kind of thing. So go ahead, Kevin. They did all the above. Sure they did. Look what she wanted to do to Joseph. You better sleep with me. Then she falsely accused him, and they put him in jail. No. Slavery is a problem with humankind. It's not delineated by a culture or a country alone. Indians had slaves. Native Americans, had slaves. Blacks had slaves, and they still have slaves in Africa. Some, people like Muslims in many parts of the world feel slavery is okay. They kidnapped, 300 of the high school girls that they did and turned them into wives, slaves, or whatever they wanted to turn them into. No, it's a sin problem, not a culture. Each culture does certain things, good or bad, and I'm not going to defend it by any means in any culture, but that's what they're so angry about, letting all the immigrants come across. Many of them are going to owe some coyote, I think they call them, right? Thousands and thousands of dollars, and you either pay up or we sell your body. And so, people are being sold into prostitution. And no, it's a wickedness of the heart. And it is beyond a color, a race, a nationality, or a country of origin. It's just all there is to it. So. Sure, yeah. Well, you got to balance that. That's both and. You're right. You're right. Yeah. Someone else, anything? But it's important to understand that. But if you're under the yoke of slavery, should consider their masters worthy of full respect. Something radically different in Christian format. Even when the children of Israel were taken basically as slaves to Babylon, what was the directive of God over there? Honor the masters that are over there. They're serving my purposes here. You guys earned what you're getting right now to the Babylonian Jews that were over there. And he said, try to earn, make your master successful. When he's successful, you'll be successful. And they followed that plan from God, and it blessed them significantly. All right, so a lot of different things. You can run through this and go back and forth on it. Consider masters worthy of full respect. Closest thing to slavery you may personally experience is your boss and you. Boss trades you $10, $20, $50, $100 an hour, and they own you for that hour. And you'll do things the way we tell you, or hit the road. Or you will be whatever the case is. In that sense, you have sold yourself to the boss for a certain amount of money, and at that point, Christians are encouraged to be respectful and other things like that. So be alert to that. All right? So that God's name and our teaching, now notice the motivation, not because the boss is worthy of it, not because, everything he says is good or smart or true, but so that God's name and our teaching may not be slandered. Okay? And you got to understand the power of that when someone says, we have that one group that goes to the funerals of fallen soldiers and just curses them and praises God that they're dead, and it's something Baptist church, First Baptist something or other church, and it's just really pitiful because, and again, most people out there don't always separate that group of people from another group. They kind of categorize you. Some people think, oh, we're Lutherans, we're not Catholics, and I go, out there in the world, they don't care. You're Christian. You're wearing that label somewhere around your name. And Mormons are Christians, and everybody else who says they're Christians are Christians. And you may have the intellectual skill of separating them out, but they may or may not have that ability. So it's something that we have to fight, deal with, and other things like that. Those who have believing masters are not to show less respect for them because they are brothers. All right? So the situation was such that someone may be a believer. And you have to remember, these cultures did not always ask the question about slavery because it had so many sources. Some were sold into slavery by the government. Some were sold into slavery, and you unless you got thousands of dollars to go out and buy people, a little bit like Schindler's List, if you've seen that movie. He would take his ring and his watch, and the end of the movie, he's going, I could have bought 3 more people out of with this gold watch, and why didn't I turn this in and turn that in? But he was buying the Jews out of slavery, out of death, out of the death camp. So kind of that kind of illustration or whatever you want to see. Instead, they are to serve them even better, because those who benefit from their service are believers and dear to them. These are the things you are to teach and urge them to do. So, for some people, a verse or a section like this really chafes them. For others, it simply is addressing the reality. We live in a bubble world if we think there isn't slavery. They actually tell us in some sources that I read, there are more slaves in the world today than there were at any other time. Okay? We're pretty naive to think it isn't going on. And many parts of the world still engage in it full tilt. So, in America, the places you hear about slavery or the equivalent is in the sex trade primarily. You would hear about that, or when somebody is being forced to be your housemaid or clean your house or be your gardener because of the fact that they owe you money or anything else like that. So we have hidden controls over people, or secreted or abusive controls over people, but it's still out there. And please recognize, very important. So any other thoughts, agreements, disagreements? Love of money. If anyone teaches false doctrines and does not agree to the sound instruction of our Lord Jesus Christ and to godly teaching, he is conceited and understands nothing. He has an unhealthy interest in controversies and quarrels about words that result in envy, strife, malicious talk, evil suspicions, and constant friction between men of corrupt mind who have been robbed of the truth and who think that godliness is a means of financial gain. One of the things that is happening a lot, at least on some of the sites, is Preachers are being called out. The richest preacher in America has got 2 jets and all that kind of stuff. And you start to learn some of the insights of what's going on with some of these people. And you're not invited to judge them in one sense because you have to know more details. I don't always know the details. If somebody writes a really good book and he gets 20 cents for every book that sells and 1 million books sell, you're going to have some money in your pocket when it comes to that. So there are things you got to be so careful of. But a lot of them are being called out now. We showed that video, prosperity, or not prosperity,